Is Trump's economic legacy a fleeting headline, or will it be a lasting force in American life? The presidency of Donald J. Trump left behind a trail of broken norms and polarized reactions, but few areas remain as hotly debated as his economic record. In a nation where policy is often obscured by personality, it's vital to separate performance from perception. From tax reforms and deregulation to international trade battles, Trump's economic legacy has reshaped how we think about prosperity, jobs, and global influence. But has that impact endured? Looking beyond the headlines, Americans are still feeling the aftershocks, or benefits of decisions made during his first term in office. Some argue Trump laid the groundwork for a resurgent manufacturing sector and empowered small business owners through tax cuts and regulatory rollback. Others contend his policies deepened inequality, harmed international trust, and mortgaged long-term stability for short-term gains. As of January 20, 2025, Trump is no longer a candidate. He's the current 47th president. His second administration is continuing to create his legacy, not just in the media but in the marketplace. Will his economic principles hold up? Were they being adapted, dismantled, or quietly continued under the Biden leadership? This video will walk through the concrete results, conflicting claims, and measurable impacts of Trump's economic legacy as it stands now. Whether you supported or opposed his administration, understanding the facts matters because they're shaping your financial future too. Did Trump's tax reforms help working Americans, or did they only benefit the wealthy? Trump's 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was one of the most sweeping overhauls of the tax code in decades. It lowered corporate tax rates from 35% to 21%. It promised relief for middle-income earners, and it aimed to stimulate business investment. Supporters called it a victory for economic growth, while critics labeled it a gift to the ultra-wealthy. In the years following, unemployment fell to historic lows before COVID, and the stock market surged, but the income disparity widened and the national deficit ballooned. Many middle-class families saw modest gains, while corporations reaped billions in tax savings, most using that capital for stock buybacks rather than wage increases or new jobs. The impact clearly wasn't evenly distributed. Urban centers and industries reliant on capital investment generally benefited more than rural or service-based communities. The long-term effects of the 2017 tax cut are still playing out, especially as debt service costs increase. As of 2025, parts of the tax law have sunset, and the debate has reignited. Should such deep corporate tax cuts be permanent? Did they truly trickle down to the American worker? Or was it a missed opportunity to reform the system more fairly? Whether you view the tax reforms as fuel for growth or as financial favoritism, their consequences continue to shape political and economic narratives today. Did cutting red tape help businesses, or did it create a new set of risks? Trump championed deregulation as a key to unleashing the American economy. His administration rolled back hundreds of federal rules, ranging from environmental protections to financial oversight, all in the name of business freedom and competitiveness. For small business owners and large corporations alike, fewer regulations often meant lower costs and fewer delays. Industries like oil and gas, construction and finance all saw immediate boosts in confidence and investment. But others raised alarms about the long-term trade-offs, in safety, in climate policy, and in public health. Critics argue that loosening environmental rules exacerbated pollution and climate issues, while reduced oversight in areas like finance could open the door to future instability. Proponents say streamlined processes created jobs, revitalized domestic production, and cut bureaucratic waste. In 2025, we now have clearer data. Some deregulated sectors continue to thrive, while others are experiencing legal or financial backlash. The effects vary by industry and state, showing how complex the balance between growth and governance can be. This raises a bigger question for future presidents. Should economic freedom come at the cost of oversight, or can both coexist with smart policy? Did America win the trade war, or did we just end up paying the price? Trump's aggressive trade policies, especially against China, were designed to reassert American dominance, revive domestic manufacturing, and reduce the trade deficit. Tariffs were his weapon of choice, and were levied on hundreds of billions of dollars in goods. In the short term, this strategy disrupted global supply chains, and triggered retaliatory tariffs. American farmers in particular felt the squeeze, with soybean exports plummeting and government bailouts issued to offset losses. Prices rose for consumers on many everyday goods. However, some companies brought manufacturing back to the U.S., and the tough posture did force China into negotiations. The U.S.-China Phase 1 deal was reached in 2020, and ongoing scrutiny of China's practices continues in 2025. The question remains, was the economic disruption worth the geopolitical message? Supporters see it as a necessary reset of historically unfair trade dynamics, while opponents see it as a self-inflicted wound with few long-term wins. What's clear is that America's trade strategy has permanently shifted, and future administrations are unlikely to return to the pre-Trump status quo. Did Trump sacrifice fiscal responsibility for temporary gains? While tax cuts and military spending boosted certain sectors of the economy, they also came at a price. The national debt rose by nearly $7.8 trillion during Trump's 4 years, driven by tax cuts, pandemic relief, and traditional expenditures. Supporters argue this was a necessary investment during economic hardship, especially after COVID hit. They point to historically low interest rates and argue that debt-to-GDP ratios remained manageable. Critics argue that much of the spending was unnecessary or misallocated, and that permanent tax cuts created a structural imbalance. Unlike infrastructure or education investments, much of the spending didn't create long-term returns. As rates rise in 2025 and debt service consumes a larger chunk of the federal budget, concerns about sustainability are growing. Will future generations be forced to choose between entitlement reform and tax hikes because of today's choices? Trump's fiscal legacy is a cautionary tale of modern governance, balancing economic ambition with financial accountability. Did Trump's infrastructure plans live up to the hype? Infrastructure Week became a meme under Trump's first administration, as major plans were announced repeatedly but rarely implemented. While the Trump administration did push for infrastructure reform, and did highlight the need for updated roads, bridges, broadband, and airports, few comprehensive bills passed through Congress during his first term. Much of the groundwork was laid through executive orders and budget proposals, but they faced resistance due to political gridlock, prioritization of tax cuts, and pandemic-related detours. Critics claimed it was a missed opportunity for bipartisan achievement. However, some localized successes did occur, especially in Republican-led states that utilized the federal funds for upgrades. Investment in rural broadband, for example, expanded access in underserved areas, though the national scale of reform remained unrealized. In 2025, some of the plans are being revived or rebranded by the current administration, building on what was proposed rather than what was completed. Infrastructure is still seen as one of the few areas where Trump had broad popular support, even if implementation lagged. Ultimately, his legacy in this area is a study in ambition versus execution. The vision was large, but its incomplete nature has left the door open for successors to claim the credit. Did everyday Americans feel economic progress, or did they just watch it from afar? Trump promised to restore prosperity for the American middle class, particularly blue-collar workers left behind by globalization and automation. His policies, including tax cuts and deregulation, were intended to put more money in the hands of everyday Americans. Before the pandemic hit, real wages were beginning to rise slightly, and unemployment had hit a 50-year low. But wage growth largely favored higher earners, and cost of living spikes in healthcare, housing, and education eroded any gains for many. The wealth gap continued to widen, with top income earners gaining more from the bull market and tax policy than lower or middle-income families. Home prices surged, while affordable housing remained scarce. Many voters felt optimistic during the economic boom, but that optimism didn't always match their actual conditions. The gig economy exploded during Trump's first term, offering flexibility but little security, and many workers remained vulnerable to sudden shifts. Today, as 2025 brings a new wave of economic uncertainty, the question remains whether the American dream truly expanded under Trump or simply just changed shape. How are today's leaders handling Trump's bold economic playbook? Now, 5 years after Trump's first term ended, many of his policies remain intact or are being selectively adapted. The corporate tax rates haven't returned to pre-2017 levels, and protectionist trade policies are still in effect, albeit with a softer tone. Both Republicans and Democrats now tread carefully when discussing tariffs and tax policy, acknowledging the political risk of reversing policies that were popular with certain voter blocs. Economically, the U.S. continues to feel the ripple effects of reshored supply chains and a tighter labor market. Wall Street has adjusted to a post-Trump world, but the uncertainty surrounding his style of governance continues to influence investor sentiment. Even the current administration avoids major overhauls, focusing instead on tweaking policies to suit evolving priorities. Perhaps most telling is how global competitors respond. China, the EU, and others now see the US as more unpredictable economically, a lesson born from Trump's sudden moves, many of which defied prior norms. Trump may be out of office in a few years, but his economic approach, bold, controversial, and unapologetically populist, will remain a force shaping how the US engages with the world and itself. Will Trump's economic legacy be remembered as bold strategy, or as a short-term spectacle that we endured? History will judge Trump's economic legacy not only by statistics, but by perception. In the eyes of his supporters, he challenged the establishment, put America first, and took on the global elite. To his critics, he inflated bubbles, neglected long-term strategy, and politicized the market. Some of his policies clearly shaped today's landscape, both positively and negatively. Others were overshadowed by personality clashes, legal drama, and pandemic chaos. In 2025, what remains is a complex ledger: deregulation, rising debt, shifting trade alliances, and a changed tax system. Ultimately, the measure of a legacy isn't in how it begins, but in how it echoes. Will future leaders refine or reverse his approaches? Will voters reward or reject those who follow his playbook? America's economy remains a living organism, evolving with every administration, every crisis, and every shift in public sentiment. Trump's chapter in that evolution is not yet closed. What comes next depends not just on policy, but on how we, as citizens, understand and respond to what came before. So, what do you think about Trump's economic legacy? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell for more deep dives into politics, economics, and history. And share it with someone that wants more balanced takes on the issues shaping our world. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.